Greetings. This is Bhante Venrakita Samanera, also known as Brother Ben. So today I want to take a look at efforts to make a bridge between the classical ancient Buddha teachings in the canonical Pali Canon texts and modern day counseling and psychotherapy. I am not a qualified doctor of psychology or psychotherapist or so on. I just have a deeply vested interest. I did actually study a diploma in Buddhist psychotherapy at Singapore, and during this time I visited the excellent public facility, the Shan Yu Counseling Center, which was established by Jenny Quek. Jenny Quek took a huge amount of effort to study through the Pali Canon texts and cross-refer those to the science of psychotherapy, counseling, therapies, and psychology that's used today. So what I'd like to do, with her permission, I wrote to her quite a while ago now to ask permission to use this material, is to read through some of the articles and show how she has illustrated examples of where the Buddha was using various forms of recognizable counseling techniques. So the book that she wrote during her period of establishing was The Buddha's Technique and Practice of Counseling as depicted in the Pali Canon. So I'm going to be reading from the abstract first of all on this first video. Let's go ahead. This piece of work is an attempt to explore the Buddha's technique and practice of counseling as depicted in the Pali canonical texts. When one goes through the long and middle-length discourses, the anecdotes, parables, metaphorical references, pithy sayings, and stories recorded through the scriptures, one is convinced of the fact that the Buddha is the embodiment of compassion and wisdom. He had stated his mission very clearly right from the beginning. When he dispatched the first 60 arahants, fully enlightened beings, the advice given to them was to walk on tour for the welfare and happiness of the people. In Pali, charata bhikkhave, charikang bahujana hitaya. For 45 years, the Buddha himself proactively reached out to all who needed help or to those who went to him to seek consultation. The Buddha has always emphasized the importance of taking responsibility, looking inward, getting in touch with oneself, being self-reliant, and letting go. In the Dhammapada, Buddha says that by oneself is one defiled, and by oneself is one purified, verse 165. And that oneself indeed is one's refuge, verse 160. And the Buddha further explains that from attachment, desire and craving spring grief and fear. For one who is wholly free from attachment, desire and craving, there is no grief, much less fear. Verses 214 to 216. As illustrated that even the early psychologists and psychotherapists like Carl Jung, William James, and Robert Thuless recognized and accepted the Buddha's approach to psychotherapy at a time when many of the Buddhist texts had not yet been translated into English, and Buddhist philosophy and psychology were not widely appreciated in the Western part of the world. In the conclusion chapter, there is an overview as to why and how psychologists, philosophers, and writers on Buddhism in Europe and the United States appreciate the Buddhist standpoint. All the techniques which the Buddha had so skillfully applied 2,550 years ago are being used by psychotherapists and counselors on one occasion or another today. As the Buddha had the ability and skill to know the mental and emotional states of those who needed help, he was able to apply different strokes for different folks. The counseling techniques used by Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Carl Rogers, client-centered therapy, Albert Ellis, rational emotive therapy, Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy, William Glasser, reality therapy, Virginia Satir, family therapy, Eric Berne, transactional analysis, Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg, solution-focused brief therapy, and many other psychologists and psychotherapists are similar to those applied by the Buddha. The difference lies in the fact that the Buddha's approaches were not experimental, but positive, decisive, and definitive, probably due to his unsurpassed compassion, wisdom, and insight. Several examples are later given in chapter 3 and 6. Listening is the most powerful and important tool in counseling. It is also a skill that is most difficult to be good at. Listening to a client is an act of compassion. The listener needs to empathize with the client and at the same time be mindful, self-aware of what oneself is thinking or feeling, non-judgmental, devoid of ego, unattached, and having equanimity, to be compassionate and wise. The Buddha is the listener par excellence, as the 9 virtues of the Buddha attest to the fact that he is incomparable. The Buddha is fully enlightened, endowed with perfect knowledge and conduct. Arahang, this is in the Pali language. Arahang, Sama Sambuddho, Vicca Charana Sampano, Sugato, Lokavitu, Anuttaro, Purisadhammasarati, Sata Devamanusanang, Buddho, Bhagava. On each and every occasion, when someone approaches the Buddha for help, he has never failed to listen. Numerous examples are described in the following chapters. Just as 2 sides of a coin, while listening is a powerful tool for the counselor or therapist, the telling of an experience is an effective mode of expression for the client to deal with his or her experiences. The Buddha's magnanimous attitude, charismatic personality, and unsurpassed compassion attracted people from all walks of life to visit him, to seek solace. The qualities, character traits, and personality types of therapists and clients are elaborated in chapter 4 and 5. The Buddha also understands that his clients need to feel safe before they are able to open up and work on their distress. He never failed to generate respect, approval, acceptance, and delight with his clients. For example, his meeting with Sunita, who was born into a family of flower scavengers and who eked out a miserable existence as a road sweeper. One day, the Buddha saw that Sunita was ready for arahantship, full enlightenment, and visited him at dawn. As Sunita was sweeping the road and collecting the dirt into his basket, his body was covered with dirt and perspiration. When he saw the Buddha coming along the road, his heart was filled with joy as well as fear. He was fearful because he belonged to the lowest caste, and he had to get off the road whenever someone from the higher castes passed by. As he could not find a place to hide, he stood stiffly against the wall. The Buddha approached Sunita and addressed him as "my dear friend," and asked if he would like to be a monk. Sunita was so overwhelmed with joy that his eyes were filled with tears, and he could not speak for a moment. After he composed himself, he accepted the Buddha's offer, and standing on the same spot, he was ordained. The Buddha knows the utmost importance of helping and allowing the client to discharge, that is, letting emotions out. Discharge is the physical component of a process that is necessary in liberating our mind from the effects of old distress. An example would be the first meeting Buddha had with Yasodhara, his wife, before his renunciation. The Buddha, accompanied by Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, and the father proceeded to the inner chamber where Yasodhara was. Before entering the chamber, the Buddha instructed them not to obstruct or say anything to her, but to allow her to pay respect to him as she wished. When she saw the Buddha, she prostrated before him, got hold of his ankles, wept thoroughly, and kissed both feet to express her grief as well as affection. While helping the living deal with their distress, it is equally important to help the dying let go of negative emotional baggage and work on unresolved issues. The Buddha says, "I declare, O monks, that volition, cetana, is karma. Having willed, one acts by body, speech, and thought." That's from Anguttara 3, the Book of Threes. As karma is mental, so is the result, the vipaka, and it is experienced as happiness, sukha, or unhappiness, dukkha. Among the classifications of karma, there is a classification that is according to the priority of effect, namely weighty, garuka karma, habitual, achina, or yabahula karma, death proximate, asana karma, and stored up, katata karma. Accordingly, if the first two are not available, the death proximate karma comes into prominence, or else a sign of the karma, karma nimitta, or a sign of future existence, gati nimitta. In this way, the relinking consciousness, patisandhi vijnana, of the dying person is determined by the death proximate volitional act he has performed. Occasions when the Buddha counseled the dying are described in the introduction chapter. The pertinent role and nature of latent tendencies, anusaya, are also discussed in chapter 2. Buddhism has developed theories on psychological causality, perception, imagination, and thought process, on behavior, the process of consciousness and unconsciousness, motivation, emotions, different personality types, a framework for psychosomatic disorders, although rudimentary, the ways and means of changing the conscious process, and many more psychological issues. Chapter 2 deals mainly with the psychology underlying the Buddhist technique of counseling. Loving kindness is the unconditional love towards all sentient beings, as discussed in the Metta Sutta. One has to start with pervading thoughts of loving kindness to oneself, and then proceed further, step by step, to engulf all living beings. It is argued that one who cannot be kind to oneself cannot bestow kindness on others. Benevolence to oneself is part of the healing process in counseling. When safety has been built between the counselor and the client is able to discharge, and then the client would be able to re-evaluate the experience or incident. In order to re-evaluate an experience, it is necessary for the client to be mindful and aware. Also a characteristic of Gestalt therapy. 2 incidents are given in chapter 6. In Patacara's case, the Buddha simply said to her, "Sister, be mindful." As for Kisagotami, she was in denial, and Buddha gave her an assignment to collect mustard seeds from a family that has not experienced the agony of losing someone to death. In the course of her assignment, she became aware that she is not the only person who has experienced the agony of losing someone to death, and that death is a universal phenomenon. The Buddha empowered her to be self-reliant. This incident stands as a unique example illustrating the Buddha's wisdom and counseling skill. In the footnote of the relevant page, a parallel incident found in the Bible is quoted. Self-analysis occupies a prominent place in Buddha's technique of counseling. One knows oneself best. Examining and taking responsibility for one's own emotions and getting in touch with oneself is an effective way prescribed to purge the mind from harmful emotions. Ideally, Buddhists who have chosen to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes mindfulness, samma-sati, and concentration, samma-samadhi, do not need counseling. As everybody needs guidance and support from time to time, therefore, along the way, counseling can be a very powerful tool. And the counselor, a noble friend, kalyanamitta, just like the Buddha himself, is very helpful. The Buddha said to Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, it is owing to my being a good friend to them that living beings, subject to birth, are freed from birth." Samyutta Nikaya 3, page 18. So that is all for now from the Buddha's technique and practice of counseling as depicted in the Pali Canon from Jenny Quek. May many beings be free from avoidable suffering, and I wish that the bridges between classical Buddhist Dharma and modern psychotherapy can be formed in healthy ways that can go on to benefit many people on the path to freedom from avoidable suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.